Shamus the Ellden. For Chris. An Ellden is not happy unless he has a job to do. An Ellden is not healthy unless his work is true. That is why this story is so sad to tell you, while Shamus the Ellden couldn't choose a job to do. Shamus is the son of Whisk and Red With, Whisk a potter, Red With a shoesmith. When Shamus was young, he worked with his mom. She taught him to spin the clay and keep his head calm. Shamus loved to work with the soft, pliable clay, but making bowls and vases like his mother did for pay was not what he enjoyed to do. It was not what his heart found true. As he grew older, he worked with his pop. His pop taught him to hammer with a smack and a drop. Shamus loved making shoes. It almost made him feel complete, but he just couldn't stomach the thought that leather came from meat. He disliked the idea that an animal had to die. In order for him to get the materials and supplies, he needed to make a lovely pair of shoes, and for that leather shoemaking was not in his heart as true. So when it came time for him to decide what he would do for the rest of his life, poor Shamus, dear soul, was confused. A potter and shoesmith, he could not choose. Both jobs he liked in some form, but not all. Neither were perfect to complete his call. Perplexed, Shamus went to his father for his advice. His father said, "Son, a shoesmith is so worth the price. I can remember how much you enjoyed making shoes, the smile on your face when you created something new. Making shoes is the greatest job you can do. We can do it together, just me and you." Not convinced, poor Shamus still could not decide, so he went to his mother for her advice. His mother said, "Son, a potter is the life for you. Working with clay is the job you should do. Remember how wonderful the clay feels to touch, and how much you enjoyed the work, oh so much." Shamus remembered the feel of the clay in his hands, and how forming an object to his command was almost a perfect feeling to him, yet making what his mother made to him was grim. Both of Shamus's parents held very good substance about what they thought Shamus would be happy doing with his existence, but still Shamus himself could not decide. To choose one over the other, he wanted to hide. The question tossed around inside of his head. It hurt his brain so much, he decided to go to bed. In the morning, he went to his Uncle Desu and asked him what he thought he should do. Desu said, "Son, a security officer is a great job, you see. Perhaps it's for you. Hey, you could work with me." So Shamus spent the turn following his uncle while he did his job, and Shamus was impressed by the respect his uncle got from the mob of Eldens that filled the village, town, and streets. It was an amazing turn, making Shamus's choice even harder to complete. Shamus thought, an officer, a potter, or a shoesmith? Now he had 3 jobs to deal with. Desperately needing help, Shamus went to his grandparents for their insight. His grandfather said, "Son, a miner is the job that's just right. Working with the soil under the land will make you strong and give you a place to stand. Below the surface holds the most amazing sights therein. You must see for yourself. Hey, you can follow us in." So Shamus followed his grandparents deep under the ground and saw the most beautiful crystals all around. There were gems and stones, some incredibly rare, but to him it was too dark and damp down there, and Shamus found himself feeling a bit too snug. His grandmother noticed and gave him a hug. "Shamus, whatever you decide to do, remember this, darling," she said. "We will always love you." Shamus left his grandparents knowing he was in their grace, but still in his heart He had not a true job to embrace. Poor Shamus was exhausted with so many questions as he sat and thought about all of his options. A shoesmith, a potter, good jobs indeed, an officer, a miner, which would it be? Shamus still could not make up his mind, so he went to his older sister and hoped she'd be kind. "My brother, you're on the wrong path. Be a teacher like me. You know, teach math. The feeling you get from guiding and teaching an anew is far better than any other job you may think to choose." Her words were inspiring, so he stayed to observe her as she taught the newlings and glowed in their awesome splendor. Now Shamus had so much more to consider. His mind spun wild with the options of his future. A teacher, shoesmith, a potter, there was more. An officer, a miner. Poor Shamus fell to the floor. He lay there unable to move for so long. His head and his heart were no longer strong. Without work he knew he would surely die, so he gave up his will and started to cry. Then suddenly a candy, who just happened by, saw poor Shamus and asked him why. Why would an Ellden just lie on the floor? Get up, get moving, get out the door. But I have no job, no place to go, poor Shamus said with the greatest of woe. No job, shouted the candy in disgust. I have never heard of such a fuss. Shamus said, but it is true, I have no job to do. There were too many, and I could not choose. Couldn't choose? Why, that's nonsense, you silly Ellden. You must be dense. It is quite obvious to me. Why can't you see what you should be? The candy walked over and thumped him in the head. Then she bent over and pulled on a thread. The thread he wore was around his neck. On it hung clay shoes that were tiny little specks. Did you make these? Asked the candy quite clear. Yes, answered Shamus with a small tear. Good. I should like to buy them then, and if you have more, I will tell a friend. So the candy took the shoes away, and Shamus sat up and looked at his pay. He smiled to himself and got up off the floor. He knew what he wanted to be, he was sure, a shoesmith and potter all in one. Finally, his decision was done. In time, dear Shamus was famous for his shoes. Every candy, every sprite had heard the news. Every jinxie, every pixie wore his designs. Every Eton, every laddie waited in lines. They bought out everything he could make, and Shamus now had a purpose for his sake. The end.